as you guys know, 2 years ago, Alex and I moved to Mexico to take advantage of the lower cost for braces and general quality of life. As well as, honestly, I'm a traveler, so I love the idea of visiting new places and exploring new cultures, and Merida did not disappoint. Every day I got to meet amazing people, and just walking around Merida was such a joy. And so while I did take advantage of visiting Chichen Itza and cenotes and amazing nearby cities, at the end of the day, literally just going for a walk, going to a grocery store, going to a restaurant, a playground was all just, it was amazing. And I loved just the normal everyday life of Merida. And of course, we did get to experience braces. You'll see that I'm not wearing them anymore, and Alex is also not wearing them, but we got to learn so much about braces and how our teeth function that it made me actually quite comfortable taking them off, knowing that we both, especially Alex, will need to get braces again. And I can't think of a place I would go other than Mexico to get those braces done again. But for now, we're enjoying not having braces on because, let's be honest, braces are not fun. And now in San Cristobal, which is such a different city from Merida, it feels almost like an entirely different country. And so I've been loving my time here in San Cris, and we are nowhere close to being done. Speaking of kind of tapping into Mexico and exploring Mexico more, you may have heard that being a tourist in Mexico, especially being a slow traveler like myself, is slowly, or more accurately, very rapidly being taken away. Mexico is not necessarily appreciating the slow tourist who stays for months and months and years. They would much rather we become temporary residents or find another place to go. And there's lots of reasons why a country might choose to limit their immigration requirements, their immigration rules, even for tourists. And I'm sure you guys already know that Mexico is one of the easiest countries to visit, worldwide speaking. It's kind of rare to get a place that lets you stay for 6 months. Now, there are places that let you stay for a year, but it's one of the more rare locations, and Mexico is also super open, having really lenient requirements in terms of staying here for those 6 months. But I've been here longer. Now, that being said, obviously every 6 months I do leave. So far it's been to the US, and I leave for 1 week. Right now, actually, I'm in the US for 2 weeks, which is much longer than I normally would. But nonetheless, I do a visa run. I go to the US, I stay for a week or two, and then I come right back getting my 180 days. It's getting much more difficult to kind of guarantee the 180. And so it kind of leads me to a difficult decision: temporary residency or find another place to go. So I've been in San Cris for about 5 months now, and I feel like I would want to be here for at least a solid year, another 6 months or more. And so while a simple visa run like I'm doing now and coming back into Mexico hoping for another 180 days will probably fill my requirement, I'm starting to get nervous that I'm not going to actually get the 180 days like I always have. Now, there are tips and tricks all throughout YouTube, Facebook, etc. on how to kind of hedge your bets. Things like making sure you have round-trip tickets, making sure you've got your accommodations already booked, or maybe like a tour already booked that you can show INM when you enter the country to let them know your intention of staying and that you're doing this as kind of a typical short-term tourist. But in my humble opinion, I think I'm pretty blatant that I am staying not necessarily in the same city. I have obviously moved to San Cris as opposed to Merida, but I think my pattern of entering Mexico for the last 2 years is pretty. And so I don't think it's a situation where I can necessarily fool Mexico INM into thinking that I'm that type of tourist. Now, I still consider myself a tourist. I certainly don't consider myself as living in Mexico necessarily, but the type of travel that I do much closer aligns with living here as opposed to just being a tourist. So part of the reason why I've chosen to stay in the US for 2 weeks, actually came here on one-way tickets, not knowing for sure if the process of getting temporary residency would take longer than normal, especially with the holidays being here. I was able to get my appointment with the consulate before I left Mexico so that in 2 days of arriving in the US, I had my appointment. And so, let me tell you how that one went. Now, choose your consulate, choose your fate. There's so many rumors when it comes to how to get temporary residency, which state in Mexico is the most lenient. For example, I'm here in the Chiapas is one of the more strict locations in terms of allowing people to get temporary residency, whereas the Yucatan, specifically Merida, is much more lenient with their financial requirements as well as just the rules. Like, they're different. And again, this also applies to the US. You guys know in the US, every state is so very different. And so requirements do tend to change based on address. Now, this still falls in my mind under the rumor category, but I have also heard choose your Mexican consulate in the US, choose your fate. And so different consulates, they have different appointment requirements and they have different financial requirements. So I'm hearing that in places like New Orleans, they have a much lower monthly financial requirement to apply for temporary residency. Atlanta, I can tell you, I just had my appointment not too long ago, and they said I have to have, for just myself, so not including Alex, $2,400 US coming in a month with an additional $600 for Alex. And I don't think I've ever really gone over all of my income necessarily, but my Navy retirement is slightly over $2,000 a month. And so that alone does not meet the requirements. And it's the only documents that I brought to the appointment. On some websites, again, it can be a little bit difficult to find. There's actually two monthly income numbers that you will see. One is called MS, one is called MUA, and one is a higher number than the other. I definitely meet the lower requirements, not the higher, but when I went to the Atlanta consulate, they told me that all consulates are now requiring this higher number because the Mexican minimum wage has recently increased, and so it kind of makes everything else increase for those of us wanting to come into Mexico with temporary residency, which makes perfect sense, and I'm glad for Mexico that they are getting paid more. Now, I do have other income sources aside from my Navy retirement that helps offset the cost of living here in Mexico, but as I've told you before, during COVID, the videos on Rev started to depress me, and so I stopped doing Rev. And even though I have played with Rev on occasion since then, for the last 6 months, I have not consistently earned income that would meet the difference in requirement, which is why I didn't bring that as proof of income. That being said, I've also thought about, well, what if I start doing Rev more consistently now? And while I will take it into strong consideration, I kind of like not doing it. And then I also do have income from video editing. In terms of official payments, my video editing source does not meet that requirement either. As with anything, there's always a backdoor way, there's always a method on getting things done, but there's also an element of maybe I'm really not the type of person that Mexico wants to be a temporary resident right now. Does that make sense? So even though the consulate representative over at the Mexican Consulate here in Atlanta offered to give me another appointment once I am able to get my paperwork organized, I politely declined. My gut told me that at least right now, Mexico's not really interested in a slow traveler like myself. And I've always said I am a traveler. I don't necessarily like the idea of tying myself down to one place, even if it's an amazing place like Mexico. And so I left my consulate appointment disappointed, but also grateful. Grateful that there are other countries to visit, grateful that I have my RV, and that I just have choices of where I'm going to go. So what is next for me? What is next for this channel? For right now, I am really just enjoying my time here in the US with my family. It's actually been quite a while since I've done this, since I've come, visited, and felt like I could stay. I could literally stay comfortably another month. But I am going back to Mexico in a couple of days because Henry is in Mexico. And so it would be really awful if I had my friend watching him for another month when I think 2 weeks is more than enough for babysitting a dog. So yes, in 2 more days, we will be flying back to Cancun, and we're just gonna see how many days we get. But I'm kind of doubtful I'll get another 180 days. Hopeful, but not expecting. And I really think that I'm just going to be grateful for however many days I&M gives me, whether they give me 180 days, 30 days, or heaven forbid, 7 days. But regardless of what they give me, this will be my last time visiting Mexico for at least a solid year before trying Mexico again. I do want to come back, and I will probably seriously consider temporary residency again, especially because braces in Mexico makes the most sense. So when we are ready for braces again, Mexico's probably the place for it. And so if I get 180 days, you will have 6 more months of Mexico videos. If I don't get 180 days, you will have less than 180 days of Mexico videos. We'll be wrapping up our time. Wish me luck and let me know whether I get 7 days or 180, what kind of travel lifestyle you would consider if Mexico was not an option for you. We'll see what happens soon.